What is up? Just finished another day, successful day, and I got word from one of my patients who works for Best Buy that one of the local Best Buys near the hospital may have some Xboxes in stock, and in particular, they may have some Xbox Series S's in stock. Now, those are relatively easier to find compared to the Series X. However, the Series S is something I was a little bit more interested in than the Series X, surprisingly. I can get into more of that later. But so I'm gonna test my luck to see if I can pick up an Xbox today on my way home from work. Do I really want an Xbox? No. Do I really need an Xbox? No. But I feel like I work hard and I deserve it. So let's see if we can get lucky at the local Best Buy. So let's go and we'll see what happens. So it is sort of funny that this is the Xbox display right here. You have like these dirty looking consoles, you can see tons of people were touching. And then you have this fancy display for PlayStation. Interesting. Okay, it doesn't look too good, but here they have the consoles on display, which is pretty cool, actually. So Xbox Series S is actually my first time seeing these consoles in person. And yeah, Xbox Series S, pretty impressive how small it is. Xbox Series X, actually not as big as I thought. I actually kind of like the design, simple, matte black, this like tower shape. I actually pretty like it. So yeah, let's take a look. Let me see if I can ask and see what happens. All right, so that was quite an interesting experience. So you saw the display shelves. It actually said unavailable. I went and asked somebody for help, and next thing you know, they actually had one, and now it's here. They also didn't even have a bag. I asked him if he could bag it for me. He said he doesn't have any bags that would fit the console. This is the smallest next generation console, and you're telling me that there's no bags to fit the console? But pretty awesome that I was actually able to find an Xbox Series S in person. I haven't seen that before, so I don't know, maybe I should film these more often, because I feel like every time I film, the last time I filmed, I was able to find those Joy-Cons, and now I filmed and I was able to find the Xbox Series S. So from now on, maybe I'm just gonna start filming everything, and maybe I'll be able to get whatever I want. So yeah, that was cool. Let's take it home and see what we think about it. All right, so now that I've had this console for about 2 weeks and some of that initial hype is starting to die down, let's talk about the Xbox Series S. And if you're looking for a proper review, this is not really a proper review. There's plenty of great videos out there which give you a very in-depth technical spec review of the Xbox Series S. Instead of what I want to talk about is the Xbox One X, which is the way that I used to game on a Microsoft console. That was the console that I owned. And if you really need to upgrade to the Xbox Series S, if you already own an Xbox One X. So first, let's talk about the Xbox One X. Now, if you've seen the design, it's a fantastic design, matte black, sleek, it's built extremely well. And essentially, up until a couple of months ago, that was the most powerful gaming system on the market. Able to render full 4K at 30 or 60 hertz. I think it's about 6 teraflops as compared to the 4 teraflops in the Xbox Series S. The user interface between the two consoles is essentially identical. The only difference really is the remote control. And actually, in terms of that, I actually use an Xbox Series X or S controller, the new Series controller. I actually use this on my Xbox One X because essentially I really think this controller is better. It looks better. It feels a little bit better because it's got a little bit more texture. Even on the bumpers, it has a little bit of texture. The only thing that's different about it is this right here. The D-pad is extremely loud. Other than that, I prefer the new controller. So I use the new controller on the older console. So it's pretty fantastic that Microsoft actually allows that to happen. This, even though you spend a lot of money on your console, still AA batteries is the way to go. Some people prefer it. I would still prefer if they would have just given you a USB Type-C cable and had a rechargeable battery pack. So essentially, if you kind of use the new controller, your Xbox One X is not that much different than the new Series version of consoles. And speaking about the Series consoles, let's talk about this Xbox Series S. Now, let's preface this by saying I've really genuinely enjoyed my experience with this console. However, there's been a couple of things to consider. So, first things first is the fact that the Xbox One X is actually able to do 4K, like I mentioned, at 30 or 60 hertz. So 4K resolution, it really targets resolution. This is not capable of doing 4K, so that's something you need to know off the bat. This does about a 1440p at up to 120 hertz, or really like a dynamic 1080p up to 120 hertz. Now that may sound like a big difference, but I'll be hard pressed to really find. I'm really into tech. I have a 4K TV that has an HDMI port that's capable of doing 120 hertz, and it's a 65-inch TV that I have back there. And from the distance that you're viewing it at, it's really difficult to tell what native 4K versus an upscaled 1440p really looks like. And from the distance that you're probably going to be playing video games, you'll be hard pressed to really find differences. So surprisingly, resolution, which I thought was the biggest deal, like I said, I mentioned in my last video where I just talked about the Xbox One X in the year 2020, I really talked about the fact that I didn't really care about frame rate, I really cared about resolution, but really 1440p and a real dynamic 4K from a normal healthy distance away from your television, very difficult to tell the difference. So there's not much of a difference when it comes to that. Now, in terms of the Xbox Series S, it has an internal SSD drive. It is 4 teraflops as compared to the Xbox One X's 6 teraflops, which sounds like also it'll make a big difference, but because of the new SSD, loading times are way faster. Quick resume is a feature that you can still use on this compared to the Xbox One X, and because of that, the console is also extremely silent. Heat management and the console is very efficient with distributing its heat, which is actually quite impressive for the size of this console. Now, the Xbox One X is no slouch when it comes to that either. That console is also pretty quiet, and it's actually really well built and has a really nice design in my opinion. But actually, the Xbox Series S is just a marvel of engineering and actually looks, I think, starting to look better. I didn't like the design at first, but the design is really starting to grow on me. So that's why the first point you really have to consider is, do you have a 4K TV, and does 4K matter to you enough that you would consider upgrading your consoles, or maybe going to a Series X or sticking to a One X? Once you've made that decision, then you have to be honest with yourself and think about, is the Microsoft Xbox Series S or One X your primary console or a secondary console for you? If it's really your primary console, this only has 512 gigabytes of internal storage. As you know, games are getting better and better. The high resolution, texture packs and all these other updates that are coming around, you're going to fill this hard drive up really quickly. Yes, it's very simple. You can get external hard drive, connect external hard drive, but remember, all this stuff keeps adding to the cost. And that's another, speaking of cost, that's another big factor to consider. The Xbox One S is actually really cheap, competitively priced at $300, $200 than the flagship Xbox Series X model. And then the Xbox One X, given the fact that Microsoft didn't make that many and that they kind of phased it out, you can find it used. And you're able to find it as a bundle with extra controllers, multiple video games. So you can find the Xbox One X at a fairly decent and very competitive price. So that's another thing to consider. So if the Xbox Series S is going to be your secondary console, it's perfect. You have your primary console. For me personally, I have the PlayStation 5. That's my primary console where I'm going to play the big third-party games. In reality, the only reason I wanted an Xbox One X, Xbox Series S, the only reason I wanted an Xbox in general was just to play some of the exclusive games. But here's the major, I think, Achilles heel when it comes to the Xbox Series S, and that's the fact that it does not have a disk drive. Now, that may not seem like a big deal because most people are going towards all digital. However, there's two big problems with that. Number one, digital games usually cost more. If you're able to have discs, you can buy them used from other people, you can buy them from your friends, you can buy them from a local marketplace, you can buy them from eBay, you can buy them from places like GameStop, and used physical games go on sale quite often, and you can get really great games for really cheap. And second point, actually, I'll come back for the second point. So the second point why to consider having a disk drive based system is because Microsoft is fantastic when it comes to backwards compatibility. So if you have a disk drive hooked up to your Xbox One X, you can play not only the Xbox One games, you can play the new games that are being enhanced for the Xbox One. You can play your Xbox 360 games, which some games like something like Metal Gear Solid, this collection over here, is the only way really to play Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 on any modern generation console. So this can be easily played. It goes all the way back to the original Xbox library. You can play your original Xbox games. So if you own a big catalog of actual physical games dating back to the original Xbox, then I would highly recommend you pick up a console that has a disk drive. Like I said in this video, if you had the money for a Series X, go ahead, spend the money, get your Series X, get the flagship model. But if you don't have the money, Xbox One X is a fantastic option because it gives you access to the entire library of years and years of Xbox games. You have so much fluidity, you have so much dynamic ability to play all these different types of games. You're not just stuck static into one generation. It's a cross-generational system. And I think that is one big feature that makes the Xbox One X a really good option in 2021, despite the fact that we have the series consoles on the market. And lastly, my last point for now is really currently at this time in 2021, we are about 8 months since the launch of these next generation consoles. There's no real killer app coming out for these consoles that makes you want to rush out and pick up these consoles. First of all, these consoles are difficult to get. The Series S is a little bit easier to find, but regardless of that, there really is no killer app for you to force you into upgrading. Instead, for my recommendation, if you have the Xbox One X, that's a fantastic console. There should be no rush for you to upgrade. You're able to do 4K resolution. You're able to do up to 60 hertz. You have an access to a disk drive, which gives you a lot of mobility and playing cross-generational games, even if you don't have a back catalog. And you can buy things digitally or physically. So you have options. So the Xbox One X is actually a fantastic option to have in 2021. Now, then people always like to talk about Game Pass. Game Pass is not such a big deal for me. I'm not, huge into Game Pass or anything like that, but this is a great Game Pass machine. So is the Xbox One X. You can play Game Pass games on the Xbox One X as well. So you basically have a Series S built into the Xbox One X, so the capabilities are there. The only real difference, honestly, is the SSD, which is going to help you with load times. It's going to help you do things like quick resume. But those are features you can wait for. You can wait till maybe a new iteration or a new version of these consoles comes out. Maybe when the price gets a little bit better once they have a new version, or when there's more availability. You don't have to rush out now to get an Xbox Series S or Series X, in my opinion. So those are essentially my thoughts. Honestly, I'm very lucky to be able to have an Xbox Series S, but I'm planning on actually returning it. I'm happier with the Xbox One X and the new Series controller. I mainly just play my Xbox for Halo. That's basically the only games I really own. Halo Infinite is still scheduled to come out for the Xbox One X. So I'm more than content using the new controller on the Xbox One X, and maybe in the future I may consider upgrading either to the Series X, or maybe I might pick up the Series S later on. But for now, honestly, it was a lot of hype. I was very happy to be able to get the console, but after playing it and owning an Xbox One X, I really don't think there's a need for it. So those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you like my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time.